Welcome to the Crow's Tavern. Tonight, we'll journey back to the time of the Norse people, exploring their villages, customs, and daily lives as we drift toward peaceful sleep together. After our story ends, you'll hear the gentle sounds of a crackling fire that will continue for hours without interruption. These soothing sounds will help guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Now let us begin our journey into the Viking world and allow the ancient tales to carry you towards slumber. The halls of Valhalla stood silent in the deep of night, its golden walls reflecting the soft glow of eternal starlight that shimmered through the high windows. Outside, the realms slumbered under the sprawling branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connected all things across the 9 worlds. Within his private chambers, Odin, the Allfather, sat alone upon a simple wooden chair, his single eye fixed not on the splendors of Asgard, but on the darkness beyond his balcony. He was waiting, as he did each night, for the return of his most trusted messengers. His weathered hand absently traced the ancient runes carved into the armrest of his chair, symbols of wisdom and knowledge that he had sacrificed much to obtain. The cool night air carried the scent of distant worlds, the crisp frost of Niflheim, the rich soil of Midgard, the burning embers of Muspelheim, all linked by the eternal tree. The soft sound of wings disturbed the silence. First one, then another dark shape glided through the open balcony doors, their feathers gleaming like polished obsidian in the starlight. Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, the ravens who flew across all realms each day, gathering secrets and knowledge for their master's ever-hungry mind. "Welcome back, my friends," Odin whispered, his voice barely disturbing the night's quietude. He extended his arm, and Hugin settled there with familiar weight, while Munin perched upon the back of his chair, their intelligent eyes, reflecting stars like tiny mirrors, regarded him with a knowing that few beings in all the realms could match. "What news do you bring me from the branches of the world tree?" he asked, as he always did. The ravens did not speak as mortals understood speech. Instead, they shared their gathered knowledge directly with Odin's mind. Impressions, images, sounds, scents, all flowing into his consciousness like water into a deep well. Most nights, they brought him fragments of events from across the 9 realms. Conflicts brewing among the frost giants, heroes rising in Midgard, dwarves crafting wonders in their mountain forges. But tonight was different. Tonight the ravens' memories carried something older, deeper, something that caused Odin's single eye to widen with interest. He saw glimpses of the underside of Yggdrasil, where its great roots plunged into realms unseen, where darkness was not an absence but a presence, rich with forgotten knowledge. "You have found something," he murmured, his fingers gently stroking Hugin's glossy feathers. "Something hidden beneath the roots." The ravens shifted restlessly, their wings rustling with confirmation. In their shared vision, Odin had glimpsed something pulsing with ancient power. Not a threat to the realms, but a secret, a memory perhaps older than his own long existence. Something waiting to be rediscovered. As Odin sat, contemplating the vision his ravens had brought, memories of his own quests for knowledge flooded through his mind. He recalled the 9 days and nights he had hung from Yggdrasil, wounded by his own spear, sacrificing himself to himself in order to glimpse the mysteries of the runes. He remembered the price he had paid at Mimir's well, His own eye given freely for a single drink of its wisdom-giving waters. Each sacrifice had transformed him. Each piece of knowledge gained had shaped his understanding of the 9 realms and his place within them. Yet despite all he had learned, all he had witnessed through countless centuries, the All-Father knew that the cosmos still held secrets beyond even his comprehension. This humbling thought, rather than discouraging him, kindled his eternal curiosity ever brighter. If there were still mysteries hidden within the World Tree's vast structure, what wonders might they reveal? What truths might reshape his understanding once more? Hugin shifted on his arm, a gentle reminder of the discovery that awaited. The raven's feathers gleamed with subtle iridescence as it turned its head, regarding its master with an eye that reflected starlight like a perfect black pearl. Through their connection, Odin sensed not just the mystery below, but also a curious patience emanating from the location, as if whatever secret lay hidden had waited countless ages already, and would continue waiting until the right seeker approached. Was he that seeker, Odin wondered, or merely the one whose ravens had stumbled upon what others had missed? Either way, the discovery called to him with a pull he could not, would not, resist. Odin rose from his chair, his tall frame silhouetted against the starlit sky of Asgard. He would not summon Thor with his thunder, nor call upon the warriors of Valhalla. This journey required solitude and silence, a path walked alone, with only wisdom as a weapon and curiosity as a shield. I shall go tonight, he decided, speaking more to himself than to his ravens, while Asgard sleeps and the ways between worlds grow thin with dream. The ravens took flight, circling his chambers once before returning to perch nearby, watching as their master prepared for his journey. Odin did not don his war armor, nor did he take up spear or shield. Instead, he wrapped himself in a simple grey cloak that seemed to gather shadows around it, making him less a king and more a wanderer. From a wooden chest engraved with scenes of his many quests, he removed a small leather pouch that clinked softly with runestones, tools for reading the patterns of fate should he need them. He considered briefly whether to take Gungnir, his mighty spear that never missed its mark. The weapon had served him well in countless battles, its presence a symbol of his authority throughout the 9 realms. But something told him that where he was going, symbols of conquest and war would be not just unnecessary, but perhaps unwelcome. This journey was not about power but understanding, not about taking but receiving. Instead, from a hidden compartment in the wall, Odin retrieved a small wooden drinking horn rimmed with silver. It bore no elaborate decorations, no runes of power, merely a simple band of interlocked knotwork around its rim. This humble vessel had been with him when he drank from Mimir's well, catching the precious waters of wisdom that had cost him his eye. Though it held no magic of its own, it represented the All-Father's willingness to sacrifice for knowledge, a reminder of the price often demanded by true understanding. He tucked the horn carefully into a fold of his cloak, alongside a small bundle of herbs gathered from Frigga's private garden, plants known to clear the mind and sharpen the senses. His wife understood his quests for knowledge better than most, having her own ways of seeing beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Often she offered him subtle aid in the form of such gifts, asking no questions, trusting that her husband's path, though sometimes mysterious even to her, served purposes beyond mere personal gain. His preparations were sparse and quick. The All-Father had walked countless paths through the branches of Yggdrasil. He needed little to sustain him beyond his own vast knowledge and the company of his ravens. When he was ready, he turned once more to the open balcony, his eye distant as he contemplated the journey ahead. "Come," he said to Hugin and Munin, who immediately took to the air, hovering near his shoulders. Show me this secret you have found." Rather than striding through the halls of his palace or calling for Sleipnir, his 8-legged steed, Odin simply stepped off the edge of his balcony and into the vast expanse of night. For any other being, this would have meant a fatal plunge, but the All-Father did not fall. Instead, he seemed to merge with the darkness, becoming part of the cosmic currents that flowed between the branches of the World Tree. The sensation was one he knew well, the momentary disorientation as physical form became secondary to essence, the rushing awareness of countless lives and worlds passing nearby as he traveled the hidden paths between realms that only he could walk with such ease. In this state, he was aware of Asgard receding above him, its golden halls diminishing until they were merely one bright point among many in the complex structure of Yggdrasil's upper branches. The ravens led him downward, away from the golden gleam of Asgard, past the realm of Midgard where mortals dreamed their brief dreams, and deeper still, to where the great roots of Yggdrasil drank from the wells of wisdom, fate, and mystery. The journey was not one of physical distance alone, but a shifting through layers of reality, each one more primal and dreamlike than the last. As he descended deeper than he had ever ventured before, Odin became aware of subtle changes in the cosmic fabric around him. The boundaries between realms, usually so distinct to his perceptions, began to blur and overlap in ways he had never witnessed. Colors that had no names in any of the 9 realms' languages swirled in patterns that suggested meanings just beyond his comprehension. Sounds reached him that seemed to originate not from any physical source, but from the vibration of existence itself, a cosmic harmony of which all known music was merely the faintest echo. Huygen and Munin navigated this strange territory with surprising confidence, their black form sometimes the only familiar reference point in the shifting reality around him. Occasionally they would call to each other, or perhaps to him, with cries that seemed to pierce through the layers of strangeness, anchoring him to purpose when the wonder of his surroundings threatened to overwhelm even his vast consciousness. As Odin descended, the nature of his surroundings changed. The clear, cold starlight of Asgard's night gave way to a twilight realm, where time itself seemed thicker, more viscous. Here, sound traveled differently, echoing as if through water, and light bent in ways that made shadows seem more substantial than the objects casting them. The air grew dense with the scent of earth and water, of growth and decay, the eternal cycle that sustained the world tree, and through it, all realms. Dew dripped from unseen heights, each droplet catching light from no discernible source, becoming momentary stars that illuminated the path before him. He reached out and caught one such droplet in his palm, curious about its nature. It felt heavier than water should, and as it pooled in the lines of his hand, Odin could see tiny scenes playing out within its depths, fragments of events from times long past or perhaps yet to come. A mortal woman singing to her child while smoke rose from distant battlefields. An ancient tree falling after standing for millennia, its passing mourned by creatures with no names in any known tongue. 2 brothers fighting, their weapons blurring with the speed and fury of their combat, while a third figure watched from shadows with an expression of profound sorrow. These visions lasted only moments before the droplet dissolved into his skin, leaving behind a lingering sensation of connection to stories far beyond his own. Odin understood then that this place preserved memories, not just individual recollections, but the collective experiences of all beings touched by Yggdrasil's vast presence. The very air he breathed was saturated with consciousness, with history, with the accumulated wisdom and folly of countless lives lived throughout the 9 realms and perhaps beyond. Hugin and Munin glided effortlessly through this strange environment, their wings barely moving as they rode currents of energy rather than air. Odin followed, his footsteps leaving no imprint on the ground that wasn't quite ground. His passage disturbing nothing in this place, where disturbance itself was a foreign concept. The path they traveled narrowed gradually, leading deeper into what felt like the very heart of Yggdrasil's root system. Massive structures that resembled roots but pulsed with inner awareness surrounded them, creating natural archways and tunnels through which they passed. These were not mere plant matter grown large, but something simultaneously more primal and more evolved. Living conduits that channeled energy and information between realms, maintaining the delicate balance that allowed all existence to continue. As they journeyed deeper, Odin began to hear voices, or perhaps not voices exactly, but communications that his mind interpreted as such. They whispered from the very substance of his surroundings, speaking in languages both familiar and utterly foreign. Some passages he recognized from ancient texts long lost to all but his own memory. Others seemed to be from works never written, wisdom never formally passed down, but somehow preserved in this place of ultimate remembering. All that is but a shadow of what might be, one voice murmured as he passed beneath a particularly massive root. The end contains the beginning as the seed contains the tree, another whispered from somewhere to his left. Even the Norns see not all threads in the great weaving, came a third, this one so faint that Odin wasn't certain whether he truly heard it or merely sensed its meaning. These cryptic utterances continued as he traveled, creating a background chorus of wisdom that seemed to prepare him for whatever revelation awaited at his journey's end. The All-Father listened carefully to each, adding their insights to his vast store of knowledge, finding places where they connected to understandings he had gained through long centuries of seeking. Eventually, the ravens led him to what appeared to be a vast cavern, though its walls and ceiling were formed not of stone but of massive twisting roots that glowed with a faint inner luminescence. The floor beneath his feet was a pool of utterly still water, so clear and reflective that it was difficult to determine its depth. It might have been a shallow puddle or a bottomless lake. In this realm, such distinction seemed meaningless. The chamber hummed with a subtle energy that Odin recognized immediately as immensely old and powerful, yet it held no sense of threat. Unlike the tense alertness he maintained when in the presence of Jotuns, or the watchful caution appropriate when dealing with the Vanir, here Odin felt a curious sense of welcome, as if the very space had been waiting for him, or for someone like him, a seeker with the capacity to understand what was preserved here. The air itself tasted different. Sweet like honey mead, but with undertones of something more profound, reminiscent of the moment of clarity that comes after long contemplation. Breathing deeply, Odin felt his mind sharpen and his senses expand beyond their usual considerable range. Colors became more vibrant, sounds more distinct, and he could perceive subtle currents of energy flowing through the root walls that would normally have been invisible even to his enhanced perception. This heightened awareness brought with it a profound sense of the age of this place. Compared to the timeless power concentrated here, even Asgard, called the realm eternal by many, seemed youthful and temporary. Whatever secret was preserved within this chamber had witnessed the birth of the 9 realms, perhaps even the emergence of Yggdrasil itself from whatever primordial conditions preceded the current arrangement of existence. Hugin landed on one of the smaller roots that arched just above the water's surface. The raven's weight, slight as it was, caused a ripple not in the water below but in the fabric of reality around them. The ripple spread outward, disturbing the perfect reflection and revealing for just a moment shapes and patterns beneath the surface. Memories, perhaps, or dreams, or truths too fundamental for names. Munin flew to join its companion, both ravens now watching Odin with an expectancy that suggested they had fulfilled their role as guides. What came next would be for the Allfather alone to discover and comprehend. Their eyes, usually so active and alert, had taken on a stillness that reflected the profound calm of their surroundings, as if they too were becoming part of the ancient memory preserved in this place. "This is the place," Odin said softly, his voice reverberating strangely in the cavernous space. It was not a question, but a recognition. He could feel the age of this place pressing against his consciousness, older than Asgard, perhaps older than the current arrangement of the 9 realms themselves. For a long moment, he simply stood at the chamber's edge, absorbing its unique atmosphere, allowing his mind to attune to its rhythms. Odin had learned through centuries of seeking wisdom that sometimes the most profound insights came not from aggressive questioning, but from patient receptivity. A willingness to listen before speaking, to observe before acting. This was especially true in places of power like this, where rushing forward without proper preparation might result in missing the very thing one had come to discover. As he waited in this state of mindful observation, subtle changes began to manifest in the chamber. The luminescence in the root walls pulsed with a more definite rhythm, like the slow heartbeat of some enormous being. The still surface of the pool developed minute patterns. Not ripples exactly, but subtle variations in reflectivity that suggested movement deep below. The ambient sounds, water dripping, distant creaks and groans from Yggdrasil's constant growth, organized themselves gradually into something almost musical, a slow composition played on instruments beyond mortal crafting. Odin recognized these changes as a response to his presence, not alarmed or defensive, but more like the gradual awakening of awareness when a sleeper senses another consciousness nearby. Whatever intelligence dwelled here, it was now turning its attention toward him, evaluating his purpose, perhaps deciding what aspects of itself to reveal. The Allfather decided the time had come to announce himself properly, not with displays of power or demands for knowledge, but with the respectful approach of one consciousness to another, acknowledging the profound nature of this encounter. Odin knelt, his simple grey cloak pooling around him. He removed the wooden drinking horn from its place within his garments and set it carefully at the edge of the still water. Then, drawing one of his rune stones from its pouch, Ansu's, his own rune, signifying communication and wisdom, he placed it beside the horn. "I am Odin, called Allfather by some, Wanderer by others," he spoke into the waiting silence. "I have sought wisdom in many forms across many realms. I come now not to take or demand, but to understand, if understanding is offered." After he spoke these words, Odin approached the edge of the still water. The Allfather knelt, his reflection looking back at him, not as the aged wisdom seeker he had become, but shifting between all the selves he had been throughout his long existence. Young warrior, cunning trickster, grieving father, patient teacher. All these faces looked back at him from the perfect mirror of the pool. This shifting reflection startled even him, accustomed as he was to the strange and wondrous. It was as if the water showed not just his physical form, but the entirety of his being across time, all his ages, aspects, and identities simultaneously present rather than sequential. The sight reminded him of something the dwarven skalds sometimes sang of, that time itself might be an illusion, all moments equally real and present to those with perspective vast enough to perceive them as such. secret do you guard?" he asked the water, his voice hardly more than a breath. For a moment, nothing happened beyond the continued shifting of his reflection. Then, gradually, the surface of the pool began to change. The image of Odin, in all his manifestations, dissolved and reformed, taking new shapes that were not him at all. The water showed 3 figures seated around a loom so vast that its edges extended beyond sight. The Norns, Urd, Verdandi and Skuld, weavers of fate, older even than Odin himself. They did not speak, but their nimble fingers never ceased their work, threading past into present, present into future, in patterns too complex for any but themselves to fully comprehend. Odin saw how each thread they wove influenced countless others, creating a tapestry of such intricate design that even his vast intellect could grasp only fragments of its overall pattern. Yet there was something strange about this vision of the Norns' work. Certain threads seemed to vanish from the weave at points, only to reappear elsewhere in configurations that disrupted what should have been their natural progression. It was as if some portions of the pattern had been deliberately removed and placed aside, leaving gaps in the great tapestry of existence. Gaps that the Norns themselves worked around rather than attempting to fill. These missing sections nagged at Odin's awareness like wounds in reality itself. What could be so significant, or perhaps so dangerous, that even the weavers of fate would remove it from the primary pattern of existence? And where would such extracted elements be preserved, if not destroyed entirely? The answer came to him with sudden clarity. Here, this chamber, this pool beneath Yggdrasil's roots, served as repository for knowledge deemed too powerful or disruptive to remain within the main flow of cosmic events. Not forgotten, but deliberately set aside until the proper time for its reintegration. Odin watched them work for what might have been moments or centuries. Time had little meaning in this place beneath the roots of the world tree. Eventually, the youngest of the Norns, Skuld, who represented the future, looked up from her weaving and directly into Odin's eye, across the impossible gulf between reality and reflection. "Seeker," her voice whispered in his mind, "what would you know?" The question resonated through Odin's consciousness, simultaneously simple and profound. What would he know? The All-Father, who had sacrificed and suffered for knowledge throughout his long existence, found himself momentarily unable to articulate a specific query. In this place of ultimate memory, with the possibility of answers to questions he had carried for eons, what single thing should he ask? But before he could formulate a response that satisfied him, the reflection rippled again, and the Norns were gone, replaced by a single thread that glowed with a light unlike any other in the 9 realms. It hovered beneath the surface, tantalizingly out of reach. This thread emanated a quality that drew Odin's attention completely. Unlike the countless threads he had observed in the Norns' weaving, this one seemed to contain within itself elements of all others, a master thread perhaps, or a key to understanding the pattern in its entirety. It pulsed with a light that somehow combined all colors while remaining distinct from them, creating a visual harmony that spoke of perfect order underlying apparent chaos. Without hesitation, Odin extended his hand into the water. The moment his fingers broke the surface, the stillness of the pool shattered. Images flooded around him, not just visual but sensory experiences so intense they momentarily overwhelmed even his vast consciousness. The birth of stars, the death of worlds, the laughter of children yet unborn, the last breaths of heroes long turned to dust. The universe in its entirety seemed to pour through him, not as abstract knowledge but as lived experience. He felt the cold emptiness of the void before the first spark of creation ignited reality itself. He witnessed the gradual organization of primal chaos into recognizable patterns that would eventually become the Nine Realms. He experienced simultaneously the joy of countless beings discovering love and the anguish of their inevitable separations through death or circumstance. Through it all, certain moments stood out with particular clarity, pivotal events where all possible futures balanced on the edge of a single decision or chance occurrence. Odin recognized some from his own long history, his choice to sacrifice his eye at Mimir's well, his complex relationships with his children, battles won and lost that shaped the current balance of power among the realms. But beyond these personal landmarks, he witnessed other critical junctures in cosmic history, some long past, others perhaps yet to come. Lesser beings would have withdrawn, their minds unable to process such an influx of raw experience. But Odin had hung from Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights to gain the wisdom of the runes. He had sacrificed his eye at Mimir's well for the gift of insight. He was no stranger to the pain that accompanied true knowledge. His fingers closed around the glowing thread, and suddenly the cavern of roots dissolved around him. He found himself standing in a forest glade that looked both familiar and strange. The trees were taller than any in the known realms, their bark silver in the twilight, their leaves catching starlight and transforming it into a gentle rain of illumination that never quite reached the ground. The transition was seamless, yet total. Where moments before he had been surrounded by ancient roots and still water, now Odin stood among trees that seemed to reach toward infinity, their silver trunks disappearing into a canopy so high above that it appeared as a second night sky. The ground beneath his feet felt simultaneously solid and somehow permeable, as if he could sink through it if he focused his attention downward, rather than on his surrounding. The air here carried fragrances unlike any he had encountered in his extensive travels. Neither floral nor earthy exactly, but suggesting both while transcending either category. Each breath seemed to convey not just essential elements, but also information. Subtle communications from the environment itself that his mind translated into enhanced awareness of his surroundings. Hugin and Munin were still with him, perched now on a low branch nearby, watching with their eternal patience. Odin released the thread, which dissipated like mist between his fingers, its purpose apparently fulfilled. Looking down at his hand, the All-Father noticed that faint traces of luminescence remained on his skin where he had grasped the thread, not as residue, but as if the contact had somehow altered the very substance of his being at a fundamental level. The glow pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, gradually extending in delicate patterns up his arm like ethereal veins carrying this new essence throughout his form. Odin examined this transformation with clinical interest rather than alarm. Whatever change was occurring seemed benign, perhaps even necessary for him to fully comprehend what he had been brought here to witness. The sensation was not unpleasant, a slight warmth accompanied by heightened sensitivity, as if every nerve ending had been refined to perceive dimensions of reality previously inaccessible. Where are we? He wondered aloud, though he suspected that where was the wrong question in this place. The forest glade felt more like a memory than a location, but not one from his own long life. A soft voice answered from behind him, "You are at the beginning, All-Father." Odin turned to find a woman standing where no one had been a moment before. She appeared neither young nor old, her features somehow familiar, though he could not recall ever meeting her. Her simple dress seemed woven from twilight itself, and her eyes held a depth of knowledge that even Odin found humbling. Her presence radiated an age and power that made even the Aesir seem youthful by comparison, yet there was nothing threatening in her manner. She regarded Odin with what might have been mild amusement, as one might look upon a promising student who has finally grasped a difficult concept after long study. The woman's hair flowed around her like liquid silver, responding to currents that had nothing to do with physical wind. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, similar to that which now marked Odin's hand and arm, suggesting she was somehow connected to, or perhaps even composed of, the same essence as the thread he had grasped in the pool. "The beginning of what?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "The beginning of understanding," she replied with a gentle smile. "You have walked many paths, Oathbreaker, Gallows Lord, One-Eye, but never this one. Some secrets cannot be taken or bargained for, they must be received when the time is right." Her use of his less flattering titles might have provoked anger from the Allfather in another context, but here they felt appropriate. Acknowledgements of the complexity of his long existence rather than accusations. She saw him in his totality, neither idealizing nor condemning, but accepting all that he was and had been, throughout his many cycles of growth and change. Odin recognized the nature of this being now, not one of the Norns, but something perhaps even older, a guardian of memories, too dangerous or precious to be allowed into the flow of time and knowledge that circulated through the realms. The silver forest around them shifted subtly as understanding dawned in Odin's mind. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches creating intricate patterns overhead that mirrored the constellations of thought taking shape within his consciousness. It was as if the external environment responded directly to internal processes, the boundary between outer and inner experience becoming increasingly permeable. "I seek knowledge, as I always have," Odin said, straightening to his full height, though he made no threatening gesture. In this place, he sensed, his usual authority held little sway. "Yes," the woman agreed, "but why do you seek it? For power? For advantage against enemies? To forestall Ragnarok?" She asked these questions without judgment, as if genuinely curious about his answer. The question struck directly at the heart of Odin's motivations throughout his long existence. There had indeed been times when his pursuit of knowledge had been driven primarily by desire for power or advantage, when wisdom sought had been merely a means to strengthen his position among the 9 realms. And certainly much of his seeking had been motivated by his awareness of Ragnarok, and his hope to somehow prevent, or at least delay, that prophesied doom. But was that all? Had every sacrifice, every quest, every bargain struck for greater understanding been merely self-serving? Or had there been something more fundamental driving him, a need to comprehend reality itself that transcended practical applications? Odin considered his response carefully. Throughout his long existence, he had indeed sought knowledge for all these reasons and more. He had manipulated and schemed, sacrificed others and himself in his quest to understand the patterns of fate and perhaps to change them. But standing here, in this place outside of ordinary existence, those motivations seemed shallow, almost childish. "I seek it because without understanding there is no meaning," he finally answered, speaking a truth he had perhaps always known but rarely acknowledged, even to himself. And without meaning, all our struggles, all our joys and sorrows are merely sound and fury, signifying nothing. As he spoke these words, Odin realized their truth more deeply than ever before. This was indeed the core of his endless questing, not just practical advantage or even survival, but the more profound need to find meaning in existence itself. Without comprehension, without context, even immortal life would be merely a series of experiences lacking coherence or purpose. The woman's smile deepened, touching her eyes and making them glitter like the stars between Yggdrasil's branches. A worthy answer, wanderer, and perhaps now you are ready for what sleeps here. She gestured, and the forest around them shifted subtly. The trees seemed to lean inward, creating a natural archway that framed a path leading deeper into the silver woods. At the far end of this path, Odin could just make out a soft blue glow, pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The path appeared simultaneously inviting and intimidating, a passage to knowledge so fundamental that it might reshape even Odin's vast understanding of reality. The blue light called to him with an almost physical pull, awakening curiosity so intense it bordered on need. Yet the All-Father maintained his composure, knowing that rushing headlong towards such profound revelation without proper preparation might result in misunderstanding or worse. "What will I find there?" he asked, his eye fixed on the distant light. "A memory," the woman replied, "but not your own. One that was removed from the weave of time for safekeeping, until one with both the wisdom to understand it and the compassion to honor it should find this place." Her words confirmed what Odin had begun to suspect, that this hidden realm beneath Yggdrasil's roots served as repository for knowledge deemed too significant or potentially disruptive to remain within the main flow of cosmic events. Not forgotten or destroyed, but carefully preserved until the proper alignment of circumstances allowed for its reintegration into the greater pattern. "And you believe I am this one?" Odin could not keep the skepticism from his voice. He had been many things in his long life, but compassionate was rarely among the words used to describe him. The woman's laugh was like the gentle ringing of silver bells. "I do not decide, All-Father. The memory itself does. The fact that you stand here suggests it has chosen you, for its own reasons." She stepped aside, clearing his path to the arched trees and the blue glow beyond. "Your ravens must remain here," she added. "Some paths must be walked alone." Odin glanced at Hugin and Munin, who watched him impassively from their branch. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Wait for me," he commanded them, though it was unnecessary. They had never abandoned him, even in his darkest hours. With measured steps, Odin began walking the path through the silver forest. As he passed beneath the natural archway, the woman's voice followed him, growing fainter with distance. "Remember, All-Father, that some knowledge changes the knower. Be prepared for what you may become." The path narrowed as he proceeded, the silver trees pressing closer on either side. Their branches intertwined overhead, creating a canopy that filtered the starlight into patterns reminiscent of the runes, though these shifted constantly, never forming symbols he could read. The soft illumination cast his shadow sometimes before him, sometimes behind, and occasionally in both directions at once, as if time itself were uncertain in this place. As he walked, Odin became aware of whispers emanating from the trees themselves. Fragments of conversations held long ago, moments of decision that had shaped the course of worlds, declarations of love and war and everything between. The very air seemed saturated with memory, preserving every word ever spoken since the dawn of consciousness itself. Occasionally, these whispers coalesced into more distinct communications, directed specifically at him. "You who have sacrificed for wisdom, prepare for understanding beyond sacrifice. The pattern is both more fragile and more resilient than you have conceived. What seems an ending may be merely transformation." These cryptic messages neither confirmed nor contradicted Odin's existing knowledge, but suggested perspectives that expanded upon it, subtle shifts in emphasis that might lead to entirely new interpretations of familiar concepts. He absorbed them carefully, recognizing that they might serve as keys to comprehending whatever revelation awaited him ahead. The blue glow grew stronger as he approached, resolving into a pool similar to the one he had encountered earlier. But where that pool had been still and reflective, this one rippled constantly from its center, as if something beneath its surface breathed in slow, measured rhythm. Concentric circles of light pulsed outward from the center of the pool, each wave carrying subtle variations in hue and intensity. The effect was mesmerizing, a visual representation of cosmic rhythm that seemed to reach beyond sight into a direct communication with consciousness itself. Watching these pulsations, Odin felt his own thought processes gradually synchronizing with their pattern, his awareness expanding beyond individual identity toward a more universal perspective. Odin stopped at the edge of the pool, studying it carefully. No obvious danger presented itself, but he had lived too long and seen too much to trust appearances, especially in realms beyond the known. Still, he had come too far to turn back now, and his thirst for knowledge, the defining characteristic of his long existence, drove him forward. "Show me what I have come to see," he commanded, extending his hand over the rippling surface. The pool responded immediately. The ripples stilled, then reversed their direction, flowing inward rather than outward. The blue glow intensified, becoming almost painful to look upon directly, even for one such as Odin. Then, without warning, a column of light erupted from the center of the pool, engulfing the All-Father in its brilliance. Odin experienced a moment of disorientation so profound that he lost all sense of self. He was everywhere and nowhere, witnessing events from perspectives impossible for any single consciousness. He saw the 9 realms not as separate domains, but as interconnected patterns in a single, vast tapestry. He watched Yggdrasil grow from a cosmic seed, its branches and roots extending to create the very framework of existence. And then, abruptly, his perception narrowed to a single point in time and space, a moment before the 9 realms became 9, when the boundaries between worlds were still fluid and undefined. He witnessed a gathering of beings unlike any he had encountered in his long life. Not gods as he understood the term, nor giants, nor any of the other categories of existence known to him. These were entities of pure potential, architects of reality itself, contemplating the unfolding pattern of creation. They communicated through direct manipulation of the cosmic fabric, their discussions creating ripples that would eventually solidify into the fundamental laws governing reality across all realms. Odin observed with growing wonderment as these primordial beings debated and decided what form existence itself would take, which possibilities would be actualized, and which would remain dormant. What balances would be established, and what tensions preserved, to drive ongoing evolution of the cosmic pattern. Through this extraordinary vision, Odin began to understand that what he and most other conscious entities perceived as immutable cosmic laws were in fact choices made at this primordial stage, decisions that could have gone differently, creating entirely different configurations of reality. The 9 realms, as he knew them, were not inevitable, but one expression among countless possibilities, selected and implemented by these architects of existence for reasons that now began to clarify in his expanding awareness. But there was conflict among these primordial entities. Some favored a reality of perfect order, unchanging and eternal. Others argued for perpetual chaos, endless transformation without pattern or purpose. Between these extremes, a compromise emerged. Cycles of order and chaos, creation and destruction, life and death, maintaining balance through eternal recurrence. This, Odin realized with a shock that resonated through his entire being, was the true origin of Ragnarok, not merely the doom of the gods of Asgard, but a fundamental principle built into the structure of existence itself. Renewal through ending, growth through despair. What had seemed a terrible fate to be avoided at all costs was revealed as an essential mechanism within a larger process. Not a final defeat, but a necessary transition, ensuring that stagnation never permanently arrested the evolution of reality itself. The death of gods, the destruction of realms, the unraveling of established order, all served a purpose beyond themselves, creating space for new patterns to emerge, new forms of consciousness to flourish. As this understanding took root in his consciousness, Odin's perspective shifted again. Now he witnessed a deliberate act by these primordial architects, the creation of a safeguard, a hidden pattern woven so deeply into the fabric of reality that not even the Norns themselves were fully aware of it. A pattern that ensured that even after the most complete destruction, something essential would survive to begin the cycle anew. This was the memory that had been removed from time's flow, the knowledge that endings were never truly final, that destruction was merely a phase in an eternal cycle, and that even Ragnarok itself was not an absolute end, but a threshold to new beginning. The revelation did not negate the reality of suffering or loss. The pain of Ragnarok would be genuine, the deaths real, the destruction complete in its way. But beyond this apparent finality lay continuation, different in form perhaps, transformed rather than merely restored, but preservation of essence, if not specific manifestation. This knowledge had been removed from general accessibility, not to hide hope, but to prevent complacency. To ensure that beings throughout the realms would strive with genuine urgency to create, preserve, and improve their realities, rather than passively accepting cycles of destruction as inconsequential. The fear of true ending drove meaningful action, even if that fear was based on incomplete understanding. The vision began to fade, the blue light diminishing gradually until Odin found himself once more standing at the edge of the rippling pool. But something had changed. The silver forest around him seemed more substantial now, more real somehow, and the pool itself had transformed. Where before it had been filled with blue light, now it held what appeared to be ordinary water, reflecting the star-dappled sky above. Odin stood in silence for a long time, integrating what he had witnessed into his vast store of knowledge. The revelation both confirmed and contradicted much of what he had previously understood about the nature of existence and his own role within it. It did not negate the reality of Ragnarok or its terrible consequences, but it cast those consequences in a new light, not as a final defeat, but as a necessary transition in an endless cycle. The All-Father felt simultaneously humbled and expanded by this knowledge. His long efforts to prevent Ragnarok had not been entirely misguided. The specifics of how that transition occurred, how much was preserved versus destroyed, remained influenced by the actions of conscious beings throughout the realms. But his perspective on the nature of that prophesied doom had been fundamentally transformed. What had seemed an absolute ending was revealed as a phase in an ongoing process, terrible but not final, destructive but also creative in its way. "Do you understand what you have been shown, All-Father?" The woman's voice came from behind him again, though he had not heard her approach. "I believe I do," Odin replied without turning, his gaze still fixed on the now ordinary pool. Ragnarok is not the end I have feared, but a transformation I have not fully comprehended. Yes, she confirmed, and no, what you have seen is truth, but not the only truth. The pattern allows for infinite variations, and much depends on how knowledge is used. Now Odin did turn to face her, his expression thoughtful. You mean that knowing the cycle exists does not free us from our roles within it? We must still act as if our choices matter, because in the unique expression of each cycle, they do. The woman inclined her head slightly, acknowledging the accuracy of his interpretation. Precisely. The memory was hidden not to keep the knowledge from all beings for all time, but to ensure it would be rediscovered at the right moment, by one who could understand its implications without being paralyzed by them. And you believe that one is me? Odin asked, echoing his earlier skepticism. The memory chose you, she reminded him, perhaps because at this point in your long existence you have gained enough wisdom to bear this knowledge without despair, and enough compassion to use it not merely for your own advantage, but for the benefit of all beings in the 9 realms. Odin considered this assessment in silence. Had he indeed grown beyond his younger self's ruthless pursuit of power and advantage? He was not certain, but he felt something had shifted within him during his witnessing of the primordial memory, a subtle realignment of priorities and perspectives. He recognized that how he carried this knowledge back to Asgard, how he allowed it to influence his decisions and actions going forward, would determine whether the memory had chosen wisely in revealing itself to him. He could use this understanding merely to secure advantages for himself and those closest to him, or he could allow it to inform a broader vision that considered the welfare of all conscious beings throughout the 9 realms. What am I to do with this knowledge? He finally asked, more humbly than was his usual manner. The woman's smile returned, warming her ageless features. That, Allfather, is for you to decide. The memory has done its work by finding you. Your response to it is your own to determine. She gestured, and the path through the silver forest reappeared, leading back the way he had come. Your ravens await you. They will guide you back to the roots of Yggdrasil, and from there to Asgard. What follows is the next chapter in a story without end, shaped by your choices but not solely determined by them. Odin nodded, accepting both the freedom and the responsibility implied in her words. He started down the path, then paused and looked back. Will I remember this place, or will it become like a dream, fading with the light of morning? The place itself is less important than what you found here, the woman replied. The memory is now part of you, woven into your being as surely as the runes you won through sacrifice. It will express itself in your actions and decisions, whether or not you consciously recall the details of this encounter. With this reassurance, Odin continued down the path, his mind already turning over the implications of what he had learned, considering how it might influence his preparations for the events he had long foreseen. Ragnarok was still coming, that much had not changed, but his understanding of its meaning and purpose had been fundamentally altered. When he reached the archway where the path began, he found Hugin and Myrnin waiting, exactly as he had left them, perched on their low branch among the silver trees. They watched him with their intelligent eyes, surely sensing that their master had been changed by whatever he had experienced, though the nature of that change might remain mysterious even to them. Come, Odin said simply, extending his arm. The ravens took flight, circling once before settling on his shoulder, Munien flying ahead to mark the path back through the Twilight Realm. As Odin followed his ravens away from the silver forest, he became aware that the woman was no longer visible behind him, though he had not seen her depart. Perhaps she had never been there in any ordinary sense. merely a manifestation of the place itself, or of the knowledge it preserved. Such distinctions seemed less important now than they might have once. They traveled back through the strange landscapes beneath Yggdrasil's roots, past the cavern where Odin had first entered the water and grasped the glowing thread, through the twilight realm where shadows had substance and light bent in impossible ways, and finally up through the layers of reality toward the more familiar territories of the Nine Realms. As they ascended, Odin could feel the weight of ordinary existence settling back upon him, the responsibilities of rulership, the complex politics of maintaining peace among the realms, the looming threat of enemies old and new. But these concerns no longer seemed quite as oppressive as they had before his journey. They were part of the grand pattern he had glimpsed, meaningful in their own way, but not the entire story. When at last they emerged from beneath Yggdrasil's roots into the starlit expanse where the world tree's massive trunk rose toward the heavens, Odin paused to gaze upward. From this perspective, the branches spreading vast above him seemed to cradle the Nine Realms like precious gems, holding them in a delicate balance that was both vulnerable and remarkably resilient. "There is beauty even in impermanence," he murmured to his ravens, a thought he might not have articulated before his encounter with the primordial memory. Perhaps especially in impermanence. With this reflection, Odin resumed his journey homeward, rising through the currents between worlds until Asgard's golden splendor came into view once more, the realm eternal, though he now understood that eternal had a different meaning than he had previously assumed. Not unchanging perpetuity, but persistence through cycles of transformation, death and rebirth on a cosmic scale. He returned to his chambers the same way he had left them, stepping through the night air onto his balcony as if returning from a brief stroll rather than a journey to the foundations of existence. The stars had shifted slightly in his absence, suggesting that some time had passed in the ordinary realms, though how much was difficult to determine. Odin and Munin settled on their accustomed perches, one on the back of his chair, the other on a wooden stand specially crafted for their comfort. They watched as Odin moved to the balcony's edge and gazed out over Asgard, seeing his realm with new eyes. The golden halls of the Aesir, the training grounds where Aineyar prepared for their role in the final battle, the rainbow bridge stretching toward Heimdall's watchpost, all of it was both exactly as it had been and completely transformed by his new understanding. Each had its place in the great cycle, beautiful in its present form, equally beautiful in the possibility of what it might become after the ending that was not truly an end. For the first time in his long existence, Odin felt a sense of peace regarding the fate he had worked so tirelessly to prevent or delay. Ragnarok would come as it was meant to. He would still fight, still plan, still seek advantages against the forces of destruction. That was his role in the great pattern, but he would do so with the knowledge that beyond the twilight of the gods lay dawn. Different perhaps from all that had come before, but containing within it the essential seed of continuing existence. As the first hints of morning began to lighten the eastern sky, Odin finally turned from the balcony and settled into his chair. He had much to contemplate, many plans to reconsider in light of what he had learned. But for now, in this moment between night and day, he allowed himself simply to be, not the All-Father burdened with cosmic responsibilities, but a being among beings, part of the grand tapestry he had glimpsed beneath Yggdrasil's roots. Hugin shifted slightly on the chair back, leaning against Odin's shoulder in an uncharacteristic display of affection. Menind made a soft sound, almost a purr, from his perch nearby. The ravens, sensitive to their master's mood, responded to the newfound tranquility they sensed within him. "Rest now," Odin told them quietly, "for we have traveled far and there are many journeys yet to come." As his faithful companions settled into their own repose, Odin closed his eye, not to sleep, but to hold more clearly the vision he had been granted. The memory older than time, the cycle without true ending, the pattern that contained within it infinite possibilities for renewal and growth. In the heart of Asgard, as a new day dawned across the 9 realms, the All-Father sat in perfect stillness, his consciousness expanded by the secret beneath Yggdrasil, his burden lightened by the understanding that even the most fearsome ending was merely a threshold to new beginning. And in this knowledge, there was profound peace. As Odin's journey beneath the roots of Yggdrasil came to its peaceful conclusion, the knowledge he had gained about the cyclical nature of existence settled within him like seeds planted in fertile soil. The All-Father's perspective had been forever changed by the ancient memory he had witnessed, the understanding that even Ragnarok itself was not an end, but a transition to new beginning. In the days that followed his return to Asgard, Odin often found himself gazing toward the horizon, where the branches of the world tree disappeared into the cosmic mist. Though his ravens, Hugin and Munin, continued their daily flights across the 9 realms, bringing back news and knowledge as they always had, the All-Father's attention was increasingly drawn to the patterns that connected all things, the subtle interweaving of past and future, destruction and It was during one such moment of contemplation that Odin noticed a curious light flickering in the distance, beyond the golden spires of Asgard. Unlike the steady glow of stars or the familiar radiance of the realms, this light pulsed with multiple colors, each one distinct yet harmoniously blended with the others. It seemed to beckon to him, calling to the seeker of wisdom that dwelled within his heart. As night descended across the realms, the mysterious light grew stronger, resolving into what appeared to be a lantern hanging from one of Yggdrasil's far-reaching branches. But this was no ordinary lantern. Even from a distance, Odin could discern that it held not one flame, but 9, each burning with a color that corresponded to one of the 9 realms. The All-Father knew then that another journey awaited him, another secret to uncover, another mystery to explore. For in the cosmic pattern that governed all existence, one revelation often led to another, each piece of knowledge opening the door to deeper understanding. Rising from his contemplative seat, Odin called softly to his ravens. "Come, my friends," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the evening quiet. "It seems our rest must wait a while longer." The lantern of 9 flames beckons, and with it, perhaps, wisdom we have yet to discover. As Hugin and Munin took flight, circling once around their master before settling on his shoulders, Odin stepped once more to the edge of his balcony, his gaze fixed on the distant multicolored glow. The journey to the Raven's secret had changed him, but the cosmos was vast and full of wonders yet unexplored. And so begins the tale of the Lantern of 9 Flames. The ancient workshop nestled within Yggdrasil's roots glowed with amber light, dust motes dancing like tiny stars. Here, Odin the All-Father worked in solitude. His weathered hands moved with precision over materials gathered across centuries, metals that had never known forge fire, crystal fragments from extinguished stars, and essence from creation's primordial waters. The workshop itself existed in a space between spaces, a forgotten hollow where one of Yggdrasil's greatest roots curved to form a natural chamber. The walls were alive with the tree's own essence, occasionally pulsing with faint luminescence that seemed to respond to Odin's movements. Ancient runes carved by the Allfather's own hand centuries ago lined the ceiling in concentric circles, each holding spells of protection and isolation that ensured his work would remain undisturbed. The Raven King had set aside his spear Gungnir and golden armor, choosing instead a simple midnight blue robe embroidered with silver constellations that shifted subtly as he moved. His one eye gleamed with concentration as he shaped the object beneath his fingers, the empty socket of his sacrificed eye, occasionally flickering with a phantom light that hinted at visions beyond ordinary sight. Spread before him on the ancient workbench lay tools both mundane and mystical, hammers whose heads had been forged in dying stars, awls carved from the teeth of beings whose names had been forgotten by all save Odin himself, measuring devices whose operation followed principles unknown to even the most learned sages of any realm. Alongside these tools rested the materials for his current work, each item carefully arranged according to an order that followed cosmic rather than practical principles. "The balance shifts," he murmured, voice barely audible above the cosmic winds flowing through this sacred space. "Shadow grows where light once held sway. The 9 realms turn restless in their sleep." For weeks, Odin had felt it a disharmony spreading through Yggdrasil's vast branches. Nothing so obvious as war or cataclysm that would demand Thor's hammer. This disturbance was more subtle. Dreams turning uneasy, hope dimming like stars behind clouds, balance tilting toward darkness. Such delicate imbalances required delicate solutions. Thus, the Allfather crafted a tool unlike any in the 9 realms. A lantern to contain not one flame but 9, each burning with the distinct essence of a realm. Heimdall had watched from his post at the Bifrost, golden eyes seeing all, yet understanding little of Odin's purpose. Frigg alone had recognized the gravity in her husband's expression when he withdrew to his workshop, blessing his endeavor with whispered words before returning to her duties. As the final piece of the lantern settled into place, a crystal lens clear as thought itself, Odin nodded with satisfaction. The vessel was complete, awaiting only the flames. He closed his remaining eye and reached into the well of power that flowed through his immortal form, drawing forth 9 distinct threads of energy. The first flame kindled easily, burning with a steady golden light. Asgard, he named it, his realm of strength and justice. The flames settled into the central chamber, casting shadows that danced with purpose rather than chance. One by one, the other flames came into being beneath his guiding hand. Vanaheim's green-gold fire that whispered of fertility and ancient magics, its essence collected during the spring equinox, when the realm's creative powers reached their peak. Alfheim's silver-white radiance that sang of beauty and light, distilled from morning dew gathered from flowers that bloomed only once per millennium. Midgard's warm amber glow that pulsed with mortal determination, carefully extracted from the dying embers of a hearth fire that had burned continuously for 7 human generations. Next came Jotunheim's blue-white flicker that held both frost's bite and ice's clarity, captured from the heart of a glacier older than the frost giants themselves. Svartalfinn's deep purple flame containing both darkness and craft, harvested from the shadow cast by a masterwork statue when illuminated by a single perfect crystal. Nidavelia's red-orange blaze that roared of forge fires and lasting creations, gathered from the first strike of hammer on metal during the crafting of a legendary weapon. The final 2 essences had been the most challenging to obtain. Muspelheim's crimson spark collected from a volcano's heart at the precise moment of eruption, and Niflheim's pale blue essence extracted from an ice formation that had never known any illumination but starlight. Each flame possessed distinct properties that reflected its realm's fundamental nature, each burning according to laws unique to its origin. With each flame safely housed within its chamber, the lantern began to hum with subtle power. The 9 lights did not remain separate, but began to interact, casting patterns of light and shadow that shifted like living things across the workshop's ancient walls. Odin watched these interactions with his single eye, reading meanings and portents in their dance that none other could have interpreted. "It is time," Odin said, rising with the lantern held carefully in one hand. He made no announcement of his departure, sought no counsel, requested no assistance. Some journeys were meant for the All-Father alone. Beyond the threshold lay not the familiar halls of Asgard, but the Veil of Twilight, a path that existed only for those with the wisdom to perceive it, a means of walking directly from realm to realm without the Rainbow Bridge. As he crossed the threshold, reality shifted around him. The workshop vanished, replaced by a corridor of near darkness stretching endlessly. Overhead, stars wheeled in unfamiliar patterns, while beneath his feet, the path seemed composed of shadow, given just enough substance to bear his weight. Here, the lantern's light took on new significance. Its 9 flames burned more brightly, pushing back the formless dark. Tiny motes of light, somewhere between embers and stars, drifted through the air, responding to the lantern's presence. The wind here had voice and intention, moaning softly with words just beyond comprehension. Only Odin, with his sacrifices at Mimir's well, could interpret its cryptic guidance. "Yes," he whispered in response to an inquiry no one else could have heard. "I come to restore what has been diminished, to rekindle what grows dim." The wind seemed satisfied, swirling around him before rushing ahead. The floating embers followed, forming a trail of light stretching into the darkness. Odin followed, his steps measured and certain. Time held no meaning in this place. Odin walked until a change in the darkness ahead signaled his approach to the first destination. The veil thinned, reality trembled, and then parted. Cold struck him immediately, the profound cold of Niflheim, where warmth had never existed. This realm of primordial ice and mist spread before him in crystalline beauty and forbidding harshness. The ground crunched beneath his boots, while overhead the sky glowed with eerie luminescence. Odin perceived immediately that its essential nature had shifted toward greater darkness. The eternal mists had thickened, obscuring rather than reflecting the realm's cold light. Ice formations that should have sparkled stood dull and opaque. Odin held the lantern higher, allowing Niflheim's pale blue flame to strengthen. The effect was immediate but gentle, not a flash but a quiet awakening. The mists began to thin, revealing elegant ice formations. Frozen waterfalls regained their crystalline transparency, while the ground beneath his feet seemed to exhale a breath long held. Movement caught his attention, a small form darting between ice pillars. A frost fairy hovered at the boundary between light and shadow, her translucent wings beating rapidly despite the cold. "Be not afraid, little one," Odin said softly. "I bring no harm to your realm." The fairy drifted closer, formed entirely of living ice, her features delicately etched into a face of translucent beauty. She circled the lantern, then darted upward, leaving a trail of ice crystals that scattered light across the landscape. Other frost fairies emerged from hiding places. Dozens, then hundreds materialized, forming a living constellation around Odin. They moved in intricate patterns, their wings creating currents of crystalline dust that began to glow with renewed vitality. When the fairy dance concluded, the tiny creatures dispersed with sounds like distant wind chimes. Only the first fairy remained, offering a perfect snowflake that seemed to hold its own inner light. Odin accepted this gift with gravity. "Your realm remembers its purpose now," he told her. "Carry that memory forward when I am gone." The fairy bowed once more before darting away into the mists, which now glowed with renewed luminosity. Odin turned back to the thinning point through which he had entered. His work in Niflheim was complete. Not a dramatic intervention, but a gentle correction. The veil of twilight received him again, the lantern's flames burning with greater vigor. Niflheim's pale blue essence now perfectly aligned with its purpose. 8 more realms awaited his attention. The path shifted beneath him. Ahead, the drifting embers gathered more densely, marking his approach to the next realm. The stars overhead rearranged themselves into patterns that conveyed meaning to one with Odin's wisdom. Once more the veil parted, and Vanaheim opened before him. A realm of rolling meadows and ancient forests that should have pulsed with life. Instead, he found the grass holding an unseasonable brown tinge, and nearby trees showed leaves curled with premature aging. He lifted the lantern, allowing Vanaheim's green-gold flame to strengthen in its homeland. As the light touched the withered grass, color returned in slow waves. Blades straightened, leaves unfurled, and the very air seemed to grow richer. A brook that had slowed to barely a trickle began to bubble more vigorously over smooth stones. Odin approached a copse of ancient trees where a white stag lay curled at the base of the largest tree. This stag embodied Vanaheim's wild spirit, its flanks rising with labored breathing, proud antlers heavy against the ground. The Allfather knelt beside the beast, placing the lantern near its head. The stag's eye opened, a liquid brown orb holding wisdom without speech, regarding Odin with recognition. "Brother," Odin greeted it simply. "The winter that touches you is not of natural making. Feel the turn of seasons as they should be." The green-gold flame pulsed in rhythm with the stag's heartbeat. Gradually, that rhythm strengthened. Frost that had gathered in the animal's coat melted away, its breathing eased, and when it rose to its feet, it stood tall and proud once more. The stag bounded away with fluid grace. Where its hooves touched earth, fresh grass sprouted. Where its antlers brushed branches, new buds formed. "As the stag runs, so runs the lifeblood of Vanaheim," Odin murmured, watching until the white form disappeared. The realm's renewal had been set in motion. With his purpose accomplished, Odin returned to the Vale of Twilight. 2 flames in his lantern now burned in perfect alignment, their light illuminating the path with greater clarity. The drifting embers danced more joyfully, while the wind carried notes of approval. The path inclined upward, and the darkness grew less dense, signaling his approach to a realm where light had always been the natural state. When the veil parted for the 3rd time, Odin stepped into Alfheim, domain of the light elves. Trees of impossible grace rose around him, their silver-white bark normally luminous enough to render torches unnecessary. Now, however, that inner light had dimmed. The Allfather held the lantern higher, perceiving the webs of light that formed Alfheim's structure. These strands of radiance had grown attenuated and dull, The entire realm seemed to exist in twilight, foreign to its nature. From within the lantern, Alfheim's silver-white flame brightened, casting illumination that strengthened the forest's inherent magic. Wherever this light touched, natural luminescence began to restore itself. Gradually, like morning awakening after long night. As Odin ventured deeper, he became aware of presences gathering beyond the lantern's direct influence. The light elves, normally eager to greet visitors, now hung back with uncharacteristic reticence. Their slender forms moved with grace still, but their famous radiance had dimmed. "Children of Alfheim," Odin called gently, "come forth into the light that belongs to you by birthright." Slowly, hesitantly they emerged, beings of ethereal beauty that defied adequate description in mortal terms. Taller than humans but more slender, with features of impossible perfection and eyes containing starlight, the elves approached with expressions caught between hope and uncertainty. Their movements, even constrained by caution, possessed a natural grace that made ordinary walking seem like formalized dance. Light emanated from their skin, not the harsh brightness of flame or sunlight, but a softer glow reminiscent of moonlight filtered through silver clouds. Their garments reflected their innate affinity for beauty, woven of materials unknown to other realms that seemed to float around their forms rather than simply drape them. Colors shifted subtly as they moved, not through magical enchantment but through the natural properties of threads harvested from plants that grew only in Alfheim's most sacred groves. Jewelry adorned them sparingly but with exquisite taste. Simple circlets of living crystal, rings carved from single gems of impossible clarity, necklaces composed of materials that seemed to exist at the boundary between solid matter and pure light. Most striking were their eyes, large, slightly angled, and filled with the collected light of stars that had shone on Alfheim since its creation. These eyes held wisdom accumulated over lifespans measured in millennia rather than decades. Knowledge passed through generations that had witnessed the formation and evolution of the 9 realms from their beginnings. Yet now these ancient eyes showed something rarely seen in the proud light elves: uncertainty, even vulnerability, as they confronted conditions they could neither fully understand nor independently correct. Their leader, distinguished by a circlet of living crystal that captured and amplified the diminished light of his form, stepped forward and bowed with fluid grace before the All-Father. Unlike his kin, whose expressions revealed their inner turmoil, the Elven Lord maintained a carefully composed demeanor, dignity preserved even in acknowledgement of need. "Odin of Asgard," he greeted, his voice musical despite its somber tone. "You find our realm in unfamiliar shadow. Our stars grow distant, our light diminishes, and we know not the cause." Odin held the lantern higher, allowing its silver-white flame to cast light upon the gathered elves. As the radiance touched them, visible change spread through their company. The luminescence of their skin strengthened, their eyes brightened, and the ambient glow that had always surrounded them began to reassert itself. Several wept silent tears that fell like liquid crystal to the forest floor. Where these tears landed, flowers of pure light blossomed, spreading illumination in widening circles. "It returns," whispered one younger elf in awe, looking at her hands which now glowed with their proper radiance. The leader's focus returned to external reality, his expression transformed by renewed determination. "We had forgotten our own role in maintaining the light," he admitted, taking for granted what should have been actively tended. In response, the leader raised both hands toward the canopy overhead. As his fingers traced complex patterns in the air, other elves joined the gesture. Their combined magic rose upward in visible streams of light, that pierced the canopy and reached toward the heavens. Above, stars that had receded began to respond, their light strengthening until Alfheim's night sky blazed with familiar splendor. The constellation patterns unique to this realm reformed themselves, each star finding its proper place. "Remember the light," Odin said simply. The elven leader returned the bow with perfect grace. "And may your lantern guide others as it has guided us." Odin departed Alfheim, leaving behind a realm where natural luminescence had begun the process of full restoration. The silver-white flame within his lantern now burned with unwavering steadiness. The path shifted once more beneath his feet, descending slightly and taking on characteristics that suggested his approach to a realm of greater density. The stars rearranged themselves into patterns recognizable as Midgard's night sky. And the veil parted. Odin found himself standing upon a hillside overlooking a small human settlement. Night had fallen, and most dwellings showed darkened windows. Only a few lights burned: a watchman's lantern, a healer's cottage where illness demanded vigilance, a new mother's candle. Midgard's imbalance manifested differently. No physical blight affected the landscape. Instead, Odin perceived the disharmony in less tangible signs: dreams troubled by formless fears, hearts heavy with unexplained sorrow, isolation even among companions. He lifted the lantern, allowing Midgard's amber flame to brighten. Its effect was subtle and internal. The flame pulsed with warm vitality, sending invisible waves of harmony radiating outward. Odin walked through the sleeping village, his presence undetected yet profoundly influential on dreaming minds. Where previously rest had been fitful and dreams shadowed, now sleep deepened and visions brightened. Outside one modest dwelling, Odin paused. Within, a young woman sat beside a cradle, singing softly to an infant who would not settle. Her face, illuminated by a single guttering candle, showed the strain of many sleepless nights. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her shoulders curved inward with exhaustion. Yet she continued to sing, her melody faltering occasionally as weariness threatened to overcome her determination. The infant squirmed restlessly, tiny face scrunched in discomfort, rejecting the comfort offered with increasing distress. The scene held a poignancy that touched even Odin, who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. In this simple struggle between a mother's endurance and an infant's distress lay a microcosm of Midgard's current imbalance. Connection strained, natural rhythms disrupted, harmony replaced by discordance despite the best intentions. Odin placed the lantern near the window, allowing its amber light to filter gently inside. The light passed through the simple glass like honey poured from a jar, spreading in a warm pool across the wooden floor. The woman did not see this illumination with physical eyes, yet its effect became apparent as her singing gradually steadied. The melody found its proper rhythm, her voice gaining strength and confidence with each note. The subtle tension left her shoulders, and her expression softened from worry to a calmer assurance. As her own state balanced, the connection between mother and child strengthened. The infant, responding to this shift, ceased its restless movements. Tiny hands that had clutched fitfully at blankets relaxed as sleep finally claimed him. His breathing deepened and steadied, small chest rising and falling in the ancient rhythm that connected all living things. "You feared being insufficient to your task," Odin murmured, though she could not hear him. "Yet you have always possessed the strength needed." He continued through the village, the lantern's influence spreading before and behind him. Beyond physical structures, he walked paths only he could perceive. the boundaries between waking and dreaming, where mortal consciousness formed its understanding of existence. The amber flame addressed these distortions not by erasing them but by providing context, illuminating broader perspectives temporarily forgotten. Odin did not impose happiness upon Midgard's inhabitants. Such interference would violate the essential freedom that defined this realm. Instead, the lantern reminded mortals of their own resilience, their capacity for joy alongside sorrow. When the first curious villager ventured out later that morning, he would find nothing unusual except perhaps a sense of renewed significance. Yet he would return carrying something intangible that would spread throughout the day, a lightened spirit, a clearer perspective, a renewed capacity for hope. 4 flames now aligned perfectly within the lantern as Odin continued his journey. The veil parted next to reveal Jotunheim's harsh majesty, a landscape of towering ice mountains and stone formations of impossible scale. The home of the frost giants existed in perpetual winter, its beauty severe and uncompromising. Unlike other realms where imbalance had manifested as diminishment, Jotunheim suffered from excess. Its natural winter had intensified beyond proper bounds. Storms of unnatural fury scoured its surface, and cold had deepened until even creatures born to this harsh environment struggled. Odin raised the lantern, its blue-white flame responding to its home realm. Yet unlike in other worlds, this flame did not strengthen Jotunheim's dominant characteristic, but rather moderated it, reminding the realm of harmony that included necessary severity without crossing into destructive excess. Where the lantern's light touched, howling winds calmed. Ice that had grown so cold it shattered spontaneously warmed to sustainable temperatures. The endless blizzard that had raged for decades without pause began to organize itself into more natural patterns. In a sheltered valley between towering ice cliffs, Odin discovered a magnificent stag adapted to Jotunheim's harsh conditions. Its coat was thick white fur that contained its body heat, while its massive antlers gleamed like polished ice. Unlike its Vanaheim counterpart, this stag showed no sign of weakness. Yet as it regarded Odin with intelligent eyes, the All-Father perceived its genuine plight, not physical suffering, but isolation. The intensified storms had separated this guardian from others of its kind. Odin approached slowly, the lantern held before him. The stag showed no fear, standing proudly as the light touched its magnificent form. No visible change occurred, yet something in its posture shifted subtly. The stag lifted its head higher, then released a call unlike any mortal hunting horn, a sound that carried over vast distances despite the howling winds. This call contained not just volume but intention, shaped by intelligence and purpose. Minutes passed, with no apparent response. Then, faintly at first but with growing clarity, answering calls echoed from multiple directions. The stag's separated herd had heard and responded, their voices conveying locations in a language Odin could interpret but not speak. With one last glance at the All-Father, the stag bounded away toward the nearest responding call. Its powerful legs carried it effortlessly across terrain that would have been impassable to most creatures. Odin continued his journey, the lantern's influence spreading in widening circles. He allowed the lantern's balanced light to remind the realm itself of harmonies temporarily forgotten. 5 flames now burned in perfect alignment within the lantern. When the veil parted next, Muspelheim's fiery landscape stretched before him, a realm of perpetual flame, molten rivers, and stone that glowed with internal heat. Here, imbalance manifested as flames grown wild and undirected. Where Muspelheim's natural state included controlled burning that created rather than merely destroyed, now conflagrations raged without purpose. Odin held the lantern high, its crimson flame brightening dramatically, yet as with Jotunheim, this flame reminded the realm of its proper nature. Where this light touched, fires continued to burn, but found their rightful rhythm, rising and falling in patterns that sustained rather than merely consumed. The All-Father walked paths of cooling stone that formed momentarily beneath his feet. Volcanic eruptions that had sprayed molten material randomly began to follow natural cycles again. Flame tornadoes diminished to manageable intensities. The boundary fires that separated Muspelheim from other realms receded to their proper locations. At the heart of a particularly transformed region, Odin discovered a salamander of enormous proportions, a primal fire elemental that had existed since Muspelheim's creation. Unlike the smaller fire lizards that scuttled among the cooling stones, this creature was a fundamental aspect of the realm itself, its existence intertwined with Muspelheim's foundational nature. The salamander sprawled across a vast depression in the volcanic landscape, its body stretching longer than 10 Asgardian longships placed end to end. Its normally sleek form, composed of controlled flame, contained within a lizard-like shape, had grown chaotic and unstable. Parts flared with excessive, uncontrolled energy that scorched the surrounding area, while others dimmed dangerously, threatening to extinguish completely. Its entire form pulsed erratically, expanding and contracting without rhythm, scales of solidified flame shedding and reforming in random patterns. The ancient being's suffering was evident even to those unfamiliar with fire elementals. Its movements, once fluid and purposeful, had degenerated into spasmodic twitches and sudden lurches. Occasional sounds emerged from its massive jaws, not roars or growls, but discordant notes like metal stressed beyond its tolerances, the very essence of fire crying out in distress. Odin approached this ancient being without hesitation, holding the lantern before him. The salamander turned slowly to face him, movements laborious as though each shift required immense effort. Its eyes, pools of liquid fire deeper than the most ancient volcanoes, regarded the All-Father with recognition born of shared antiquity. No words passed between them. The salamander possessed intelligence but not speech, as other realms understood it. Their communication occurred on a more fundamental level, consciousness acknowledging consciousness across the divide of entirely different modes of existence. The lantern's crimson flame pulsed in rhythm with the salamander's fluctuating energy. Gradually, that rhythm stabilized. The chaotic flaring ceased, replaced by controlled burning. Its form solidified into more defined contours, and its movements gained purposeful grace. When stability had been fully restored, the salamander performed a ceremonial action. It opened its enormous maw and released a perfect sphere of concentrated flame that hovered between them, neither expanding nor diminishing. Odin inclined his head in acknowledgement and acceptance. With one hand, he reached out and touched the sphere, absorbing its essence without being consumed. A promise from one of Muspelheim's most ancient entities that it would help maintain the restored balance. 6 flames now burned in harmony within the lantern. When the veil parted again, Svartalfheim opened before him, realm of the dark elves and home to shadow magic that balanced Alfheim's light. The imbalance here manifested as shadows grown too absolute. Darkness deepened beyond its proper state, until even the dark elves themselves struggled to navigate their home realm. Odin raised the lantern. its deep purple flame responding. Where the light touched absolute darkness, shadows regained their proper gradation, revealing rather than concealing the underground realm's intricate beauty. The All-Father walked passages where stalactites and stalagmites formed natural columns. Crystal formations regained their subtle inner glow. Underground streams resumed their proper flow, their surfaces reflecting restored ambient light in patterns that painted moving images across stone walls. Dark elves watched from hidden vantage points, maintaining their distance, not from fear, but from inherent preference for indirect communication. In a chamber whose walls had been carved with historical records, Odin discovered evidence of the Dark Elves' own attempts to address the imbalance. Ritual circles drawn in luminous materials formed complex patterns across the floor. As he studied these signs, a voice addressed him from shadows, deliberately maintained despite the lantern's influence. All-Father. The speaker remained unseen. Your intervention was anticipated. Odin turned toward the voice without attempting to pierce the concealing darkness. Yet you did not request Asgard's aid, he observed. Pride is not exclusive to your realm, Borson. We sought to correct the imbalance through our own arts, and found the darkness grown beyond your methods, Odin concluded. Silence extended momentarily, then, we are not accustomed to requesting assistance. Odin nodded in understanding. The lantern reminds rather than imposes, he explained. When I depart, Svartalheim will maintain its sovereignty, merely restored to proper balance. We have observed your work in other realms, the voice acknowledged. Your restraint is noted. Will you permit my continued passage? Odin asked, granting them the dignity of choice. The eastern passages lead to the borderlands, where your next transition awaits. We will not hinder your journey. With this exchange completed, the presence withdrew. Odin proceeded as directed, noting increasing signs of renewed activity throughout the realm. Craftsmen returning to workshops, gardens showing new growth, caretakers moving with renewed purpose. 7 flames now aligned within the artifact. When the veil parted again, Nidavellir spread before him, realm of the dwarves and home to craftsmanship unrivaled across the 9 worlds. Here, imbalance manifested not in physical properties, but in creative inspiration. The forges burned as hot as ever, materials remained abundant, but dwarven works had grown derivative, technically perfect, but lacking the innovative spark. Odin held the lantern higher, its red-orange flame brightening dramatically. As this light spread, it ignited something beyond physical fire. Ideas long dormant awakened in creators' minds. Possibilities previously overlooked suddenly became apparent. The dwarves approached once they recognized their visitor. Their spokesman, an ancient dwarf whose beard reached below his knees, stepped forward with a formal bow. All-Father, he greeted. Nidavellir has not received the ruler of Asgard since the forging of Gungnir. What brings you to our realm? Odin gestured to the lantern. I walk all 9 realms to address imbalances that threaten Yggdrasil's stability, he explained. This light reminds each world of its true nature. The ancient dwarf's eyes studied the lantern with professional interest. And you believe our realm requires reminding? His tone held no offense, merely curiosity. Have your recent work satisfied your own standards? Odin asked. Has inspiration flowed as readily as in ages past? The craftsmen exchanged glances. Several shifted uncomfortably. "We have produced," the spokesman acknowledged carefully. "Our forges burn, our hammers fall, yet the fire that burns brightest in true creation has dimmed." Odin held the lantern higher, allowing its flame to cast light directly upon the gathered dwarves. As the light touched them, subtle changes spread. Eyes brightened with renewed purpose. Hands began to move, fingers tracing shapes in the air as ideas suddenly demanded expression. The ancient spokesman experienced this change most visibly. His posture straightened, years seeming to fall away. "I see it now," he murmured. "The flaws in our approach these past centuries. We mastered technique so completely that we forgot its purpose as vehicle for vision." The dwarves dispersed rapidly, eager to translate newly awakened ideas into tangible form. Everywhere, similar scenes unfolded. Craftsmen abandoning routine tasks to pursue ideas that suddenly demanded expression. Apprentices finding solutions to problems that had stymied their progress for decades. 8 flames now aligned within the artifact. When the veil parted for the last time, Helheim opened before him. Realm of the dead, who were neither valorous enough for Valhalla nor evil enough for deeper condemnation. Here, imbalance manifested as disrupted peace. Where Helheim should have offered quiet reflection and gradual acceptance, its spirits now wandered with increasing restlessness. Odin raised the lantern, its pale blue-white flame brightening. This light spread with particular gentleness, touching the wandering spirits not with command, but with reminder of purpose, temporarily forgotten. Where this illumination reached, restlessness calmed. Spirits that had paced endlessly found ability to pause and perceive their surroundings with greater clarity. In a meadow where particularly restless spirits had gathered, Odin discovered the realm's caretaker awaiting him. Hela stood alone, her form both beautiful and terrible, depending on which aspect one perceived. "Allfather," she greeted him with formal respect, "you bring light to the realm of endings." Odin inclined his head. "Even endings have their proper nature, which recent imbalance has disrupted." Hela's gaze shifted to the restless spirits, her expression revealing concern. "They arrive troubled," she stated, "carrying fears that prevent peaceful transition." Odin approached, the lantern's light illuminating them both. "The imbalance affects all realms differently," he explained. "Here, it manifests as disrupted transitions." Hela studied the lantern with growing comprehension. "You carry each realm's essence to remind rather than remake." "The final flame returns home," Odin confirmed. "With its restoration, Yggdrasil may regain harmony." Around them, the gathered spirits began to manifest changes. Restless pacing slowed to contemplative wandering. Expressions of confusion eased into acceptance. Some spirits who had maintained rigid isolation began to acknowledge others, forming the quiet community that characterized Helheim at its most functional. As Odin walked the final paths of Helheim, a voice reached him, not from any nearby presence, but carried on winds that connected realms despite apparent separation. "Husband." Frigg's tone held warmth that transcended distance. "You observe from afar," Odin responded softly, knowing she would perceive his words across the separation. "As I have throughout your journey," she confirmed. "The balance returns, Yggdrasil's branches steady. The final flame aligns," Odin told her. "When I return, the lantern's work completes." "Then conclude your journey, husband," Frigg's voice encouraged. "Asgard awaits its king's return." Odin returned to the Vale of Twilight for the final transition of his journey. What had begun as a hesitant path through shadow had transformed completely during his progress through the realms. Now it resembled a bridge of solid light spanning the distance between worlds, so clearly defined that it seemed impossible to stray from its course. The floating embers that had originally appeared as hesitant guides now moved with purpose and confidence, forming intricate patterns that shifted in harmony with the lantern's 9 aligned flames. The between-real darkness had receded entirely, replaced by a gentle luminescence that emanated from the path itself. Colors impossible to name swirled within this light, suggesting the unique essences of all 9 realms blending without losing their individual qualities. The very texture of the veil had changed, becoming more substantial, yet paradoxically easier to traverse, as if reality itself acknowledged and supported Odin's restorative purpose. Most significantly, the wind's voice had evolved from its original cryptic whispers to a harmonious chorus carrying messages from across Yggdrasil's vast structure. Voices from all 9 realms, some recognizable, others entirely alien to conventional perception, blended into coordinated music rather than discordant noise. Their unified message spoke of balance returning, of ancient rhythms rediscovered, of connections re-established after too long in isolation. This transformation of the veil itself represented perhaps the most meaningful indicator of Odin's success. The pathways between realms constituted a realm of their own in certain respects, the connective tissue that bound the 9 worlds into a functioning whole, rather than isolated domains. That this in-between space now flourished with renewed vitality suggested not just individual healing, but systemic restoration throughout Yggdrasil's structure. When the veil parted for the last time, Asgard welcomed its king home. Odin placed the lantern carefully on his workbench, its 9 flames burning with perfect stability. As he watched, these flames began a final transformation, merging into a single flame at the lantern's heart, not losing their distinct qualities, but combining them into unified whole. This central light pulsed once, twice, then stabilized into steady radiance that perfectly balanced all 9 essences. "It is done," Odin murmured, understanding that such balance required ongoing attention rather than single intervention. The lantern would remain in Asgard, available should future imbalance develop. Beyond the workshop's windows, Asgard's perpetual twilight had shifted subtly toward dawn colors. The golden city gleamed with renewed purpose, its inhabitants moving through ancient routines with refreshed awareness. 9 flames burned as one within the lantern, their lights spreading subtle harmony through all realms connected by Yggdrasil's living branches. Balance had been restored not through force, but through reminder, not through conquest, but through compassion. Throughout the 9 realms, beings of all kinds found dreams turning peaceful that night, rest coming easier than it had in long ages, and dawn bringing renewed clarity. The lantern of 9 flames continued its quiet work from Asgard's heart, a steady pulse of balanced light that reminded all worlds of their true nature. In this gentle illumination, the cosmos found its rhythm once more. Our Viking tale has now concluded. You will now hear the peaceful sounds of a crackling fire and gentle ambient noises that will continue throughout the night without any interruptions, helping you drift into a deep and restful sleep. May the stars of the northern sky watch over you, and may you find peaceful rest until the morning light. Sleep well, and good night.